Is a Throwback Thursday, and of course some inspiration for you all together. So Wusu basically says, shake it off, shake all the negativity off, the hardships, the complaints, shake it all off and just look forward into a brighter future. Do what you have to do and try to survive, basically, with hope. And that is what we're starting our show with today. Welcome to TV3Newday. My name is Bella Mundi, and well, we're back again to talk about all the things that have been trending since yesterday up until now. Some major headlines from the ex-PPA boys finally being charged by the Office of the Special Prosecutor, to some updates on the issue concerning the alleged Achimota forest, sale or release to the Owu family. Now, yesterday, the Lands and Resources Minister was speaking on this, breaking it further down. And he says that as the Lands Minister, he only inherited decisions that had been made by previous governments. So from the Eswal Kufuor government up until the former President John Dramani Mahama's government. And so he was just implementing decisions that had already been made concerning the release of the lands to the Owu family. And so he has no hand in the increase from, the about 99 acres of land around the Achimota forest, the peripheral areas, to about 361 acres of land. He says he had no hand in that. He was just implementing. But also, a former lands minister has been speaking, Honorable Inusa Fuseni, and he said that as far as he's concerned, when he was in position as Minister of Lands, he only signed off not more than 100 acres of lands to be released to the Owu family. And he also traces it back to the Kufuor era, where this conversation started, and eventually they had to give out the lands under the former John Dramani Mahama government as well. He says that as far as he's concerned, they only released less than 100 acres of land to the Owu family, and so he's not sure why it has suddenly risen to about 361 acres. He says that he's done his checks. He's found out from some links in the forest ministry, forestry department, and they are saying that it's because a greater part of the land that was initially released to the Owu family had been encroached on, and so there was a need to now do another evaluation, and probably that is why this new acre number of acres has been released to the family. We'll get into that conversation and talk more about it. There's an expert who is insisting that this action undermines developments. By the way, if we can listen to this expert quickly, and we'll come back. So these are live views, pardon me, we could not play that, but these are live views from the Achimota forest. Very vast land, by the way, very vast. And let me give you some history on this. And so these lands were acquired from the Owu family back in 1921, and it was acquired so that the Achimota school could be constructed. And then in 1927, government went back and acquired some more land, some 479 hectares of land from the same family to expand the school. And of course, according to the lands minister, compensation was paid for this 1921 acquisition, but not the 1927 acquisition. So we're told that some £4,000 was paid to the Owu family back in the day when that 1921 land was acquired. Then in 1930, the land that was bought in 1927, which is the 479 hectares of land, it was declared as a forest reserve by Order 31. And Order 31 is from the Forest Act of 1927. So they made it a forest reserve. And so they also gave way for the school to also get some wood from the forest so they can provide some energy for the school. So this is how the school was surviving. Then in 2007, the Owu family now came back to government and said that part of the land that she took from us is not being used. And so if you could release those lands to us, we would be grateful. And so that's what happened back in 2007. So it says that the lands ministry and the president at the time, and in 2007 it was former President Kufuor that was in power. So an agreement was made to release parts of the land to the family, about 90 acres, but it was not executed. So in 2011, the Owu family petitioned government again, this time under former president, the late President John Evans Atta Mills, requesting for portions of the land lands to be released to them. So a committee was set up to look into this, and this was the Afaridate committee that was set up to look into it. And well, they realized that yes, indeed, these lands belong to the old family. To some extent, were not being used, so they decided to go ahead and release the lands. And so in 2013, the John Dramani Mahama government decided to embark on a project, however, to use the reserve to develop an eco-tourism park. And they also agreed to grant the lease to the Owu family, but it was just a portion, however, and was just the peripheral part. But if you listen to Honorable Nusa Hussein, who was then the lands minister, he says that they only granted this release on compassionate grounds. And so it's not as if they gave it to them for them to use for whatever they wanted to use it for. At that time, when it had been declared that the forest was going to be used for an eco-tourism park, they mentioned that the old family could not access the lands until they're able to prove to governments that they were going to use those lands for anything that also benefits the forest reserve. So whether it's for protecting the animals, whether it's for further protecting the forest, or even providing recreational activities for people who would visit the ecotourism park eventually, that is the only way they would have allowed the old family to get into the land and not and take access or claim access of it. And so for a long time, they were not given the chance to go in there because it was declared as a forest reserve and it was going to be used for an ecotourism park. That didn't happen, and I'm talking about the park. I mean, a company was contracted to start that work. Didn't happen until the Ado Dankwa Akufo-Addo government came into power. And so the lands minister now says that there was a need for them to give those lands back to the family, but at the same time, they also had to issue an executive instrument, 144, to declare that these lands were released to them so that there'll be a cessation of those lands under the forest reserve. But there's another one, 154, that says that regardless, the rest of the forest lands is still a forest reserve and should be treated as such. This has caused a lot of controversy. There are a number of people who are speaking. Bright Simmons says that Accra deserves at least one green retreat in its concrete jungle, and so it's even wrong in the first place to want to give these lands to the old family. There are people who are asking questions that if this has been granted to the old family, what about the other forest reserves across the country? Can these families who initially owned these lands that were acquired by government come back and say that, well, you're not using parts of the land, so I want to reclaim it? And that means that if you've given it to old family, then you'll give it to us as well, because you've already ruled in favor of the family in the first place. So these are very genuine concerns that have come up as a result of this matter, and we're going to inquire into it even more, listening to Honorable Nusa Hussein and what he's saying, that they never signed off more than 100 acres to the old family. Yet, Honorable Samuel Abujinapo says that he was only implementing what had initially been agreed on by the previous government, which was the 361 acres or so. So we'll have to interrogate that and really try to understand exactly what happened and what agreement was signed on. And so later on the show, look forward to this conversation. I really don't know what you think about it. I don't know if you are in favor, after the explanation from the minister, are you in favor of the lands being given back to the old family, at least the peripheral lands around the forest, or do you think that it should not be given out at all? We want to hear from you. The hashtag is TV3Newday. Let's hear from you. But also in the news this morning, so the PPA, ex-PPA boss, Ejenim Boating Eje, has finally been charged. And it's from the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Let me give you the details of the charge on this particular matter. So there are 9 counts of directly and indirectly influencing the procurement process to obtain an unfair advantage in the award of procurement contracts. And also his brother-in-law, Francis Kweku Ahin, has been charged with 1 count of using public office for profit. And so they're expected to be in court at the High Court in Accra on Wednesday, the 25th of May. 2022. Remember, as far back as 2019, when there was the contract for sales saga involving Manasseh Azuri-Awuni. He is, of course, an investigative journalist, and so he discovered that the ex-PPA boss allegedly owned another company on the side that was winning contracts from government and selling them out to third parties, and they won this under restrictive tendering. And of course, that means that there's conflict of interest, because you cannot be the boss of the PPA, which is a procurement authority, and also have a company that gives out some of these contracts. So let's listen to what Manasseh had to say after these charges were made on the ex-PPA boss.
Well, it doesn't come to me as a surprise because of prior information that I have. I last year was invited to the Office of the Special Prosecutor to write a statement and provide the office with more evidence. And I think when Mr. Kisia Jabin took over, I've had a meeting with him and some of his investigators on this case to assist in the process. So I knew there was something coming up. And if you recall, in February this year, he released a statement detailing the number of cases, and the PPA scandal, or the contracts for sales scandal, was one of the 3 cases. He said investigations were far advanced and he would be announcing outcomes in the coming weeks. So I am not surprised. I rather am happy that at long last this case is proceeding to a direction that we should expect some closure or a logical conclusion.
All right, and so that is Manasseh Azuri, and he really was in the thick of things when this story broke. In fact, he was the investigative journalist who unearthed this alleged rot at the PPA concerning the ex-PPA boss, Mr. Ejenim Boateng Eje. And so they will head to court on the 25th of May 2022, and that is when the case will be heard by the court of law. But even before the special prosecutor preferred these charges on the ex-PPA boss, back on the 25th of February 2022 was when Shraj released, a report on decisions that they had made in the matter between the Ghana Integrity Initiative and Mr. ABAJ. So remember that the GII had petitioned Shraj to further investigate this matter and profess some charges on Mr. ABAJ. And so the reports read at the beginning that Mr. Ejenim Boateng Eje, former CEO of PPA, first of all, is disqualified from holding public office for 10 years. And these were the decisions that were made by Shraj after that investigation. Secondly, they said he was directed to declare his assets in accordance with Article 2861C of the 1992 Constitution within 3 months.